In olden days, in ancient times, there was no particular instrument with which distances or lengths or anything could be measured. Now, what do you think people used to do if they wanted to measure a particular length? Let's say that we have a block, as you can see in the picture. Now, let's say somebody wants to measure the length and breadth of this block. So, how do you think he or she is going to do it? Because, as I told you, like we have these days, compasses and rulers and different kinds of scales, in olden days, these were not there. So, in order to measure a particular length, people used to use body parts. So, in this case, people used one hand span. One handspan is the distance which you get if you stretch out your thumb and your little finger in this manner. So using this, in this manner, people measured, let's say, the length and breadth of a given block. Now what if the distance to be measured was greater? In this case, it is just one block. But what if the distance to be measured was in between two houses? So in that case, one handspan would be insufficient. In that case, people used the length of a foot and they measured the distance in between feet. So let's say a person wants to measure the distance in between these two houses. So instead of using his handspan, which would be quite inconvenient, he simply walks from this point to that point and measures how many steps he has taken. So the number of steps he has taken, the distance he will say is that many feet in between the two houses. Now in Egypt, when the civilization was developed, people had another method of measuring. This measuring was known as a cubit. A cubit was known as the distance in between one's elbow and the tip of the middle finger. So if you consider the length between the tip of your middle finger and your elbow, this gives you 1 cubit. And this system of measurement was prevalent in ancient Egypt. So as you see, different units were used by using different body parts. In this case, to measure the distance in between two huts, we found that feet were used. In order to, let's say, measure the distance in between the two edges of a door, handspans were used. So in this manner, different units were used. We also saw that in ancient Egypt, a cubit was used. So what exactly are we doing when we express the distance or the length in terms of feet or handspans? We are basically carrying out measurement. So what is measurement? Measurement is the process of comparison of an unknown quantity with a known standard quantity. So in ancient times, the known standard quantity used to be a handspan or a foot or a cubit. And with this was used to compare the length of a block or the distance in between two places. And this was how measurement was carried out. Now unit. What is unit? The standard quantity, which is a constant used for the comparison, is known as a unit. So when I say 6 handspans or 10 feet, handspans, these represent a unit. Even a cubit. A cubit also represents a unit which was present in those days. So how can we define a physical quantity? A physical quantity is basically what we are measuring. Let's say the length of a block or the distance in between two huts. So physical quantity is a physical property of a phenomenon, body or substance that can be quantified by measurement. Now if I ask you a question that can you measure the amount of love that your parents give you? Or let's say, can you measure how happy you are when you score very well in a test? No. These quantities cannot be measured because they cannot be quantified. Whereas a physical quantity is a property of a substance that can be quantified by measurement, and only such quantities are known as physical quantities that are measurable. So there are different kinds of physical quantities. Length is a physical quantity, width is a physical quantity, area, mass, volume, all of these are physical quantities which can be quantified by measurement and assigned a certain value. Now, physical quantity is normally represented in this manner. That is, physical quantity equals numerical value into unit. The numerical value is also the magnitude or how big it is, and unit represents the standard comparison that has been used in order to measure that given physical quantity. Now, let's say a person who does not have a ruler, scale, or a compass wants to measure the length of this particular block. So he uses his handspans. As you can see, this marks out one handspan, and if he simply places his thumb by this method and extends his hand again, that will cover another handspan. So he measured it as two handspans. Now over here, how big is this particular object? It is 2. So that represents the magnitude or the numerical value. And what is the standard comparison that has been used? It is handspans, which is also known as the unit. So as you can clearly see, the physical quantity that is the length of this object is given as 2, which is the magnitude, times handspans, that is the unit. So in order to carry out a particular measurement, we must know two things. The first, the unit in which we are about to measure the given quantity, and secondly, the numerical value which expresses how many times a standard quantity or unit is contained in that physical quantity. So in the previous case, we saw that in the given box or the given block, 2 handspans were contained in its length. So we firstly need the unit, and secondly the numerical value in order to carry out the measurement.